Okay, welcome everybody. I just admitted everybody into the waiting room, so hopefully you are all joining us now. Thanks so much for being a part of today's webinar. My name is Amanda Latre. I'm the WiSE Program Support Coordinator, and this is our Portfolio Prep for Success webinar. And today we're featuring a panel of portfolio reviewers to give you some feedback, advice, and give you an opportunity to ask your questions. Okay, so before we get started, I do want to point out that all of you are muted. You've probably noticed that. We're doing that purposefully because a number of you are able to join us today. We have a large group, I think about 20 to 30 people will be joining us today, so that's fantastic. And if we mute you all, we can cut down on background noise and those distractions. So that's why we're doing that. If you have a question, please feel free to raise your hand. That's the little blue raise your hand button near your name. And we will unmute you and you can ask your question. We also have the chat box and you can enter your questions there. So however you prefer to ask your questions, we can do both. Remember, the session is for you, so please ask your questions. We have much of it set up in a Q&A format, and we want to make sure it's as helpful to you as possible. So ask those questions and we will get to as many of them as we can. Okay, and finally, we are recording. Our panelists did give us permission to record. Some of your peers, fellow WiSE-FPP associates, could not be with us today, so we're going to record it, share with them, post. If for some reason you do not want to be recorded, part of the recording, but you do have a question, you can send me a private chat in the chat box. You can send it to me or Isabel Munoz. Isabel is joining us today to kind of help monitor the chat, help with any technical issues. You can send her a message in the chat as well. She's our graduate program assistant with WiSE, and she's helping us out today. So feel free to send a private question to Isabel or myself, and we will ask it without saying your name. That's perfectly fine. Okay. So just a couple reminders before we introduce our panel. I have sent out the portfolio components and instructions for both year 1 and year 2. Please remember that they are different depending on whether you are a first-year associate or a second-year associate. So pay attention to that. They're clearly marked. Second-year associates do have more as part of their portfolio. It's part of the progression in the program. You complete certain parts as you're in your first year, and then in your second year you fine-tune and add a couple more components, such as your research statements. So just make sure you have the correct instructions. If you don't have those, you need those, shoot me an email and I will get them to you, no problem. One of the questions that was submitted in advance via our RSVP form was, how do I submit it as one PDF? So I thought I would address that right here before we get started. I included a link here. I will share this after the fact as well. Digital Trends has a nice simple tutorial on how to combine your Word documents, your PDFs into one PDF to submit to us. So there's a link there. And again, I will share after the fact. There are other tutorials online as well. If you have any issues with that, again, don't hesitate to contact us and we'll help you out with that. And then finally, just want to remind everybody, your portfolios are due Monday, May 4th. So that's coming up. I can't believe how quickly the semester is going. So any questions about that, let me know. But the deadline is Monday, May 4th, 5 p.m. and one PDF to our suwise@syr.edu email. Okay. All right. So I just want to double check before I start introducing our panelists. I know Dr. Shika Nangia had a power outage this morning. I don't know if Shika is with us. Shika, are you with us yet? I don't know that you are. So hopefully at some point today we'll have Dr. Nangia joining us and we'll give her a chance to share her advice. Dr. Coleman, are you with us? Okay, Dr. Coleman was also having a couple of issues, so.
Oh, you've unmuted me now. I was muted by you, so I couldn't unmute myself.
Oh, great. Dr. Coleman is with us. Fantastic. Okay, great. So I do want to introduce Professor Heather Coleman, biology professor. She is a WiSE-FPP faculty advisor involved with our WiSE a great supporter of WiSE, and we are thrilled to have her with us today. And then finally, I do want to introduce Dr. Dan Olson-Bang. He is Director of Professional and Career Development with the Graduate School, and I know he's with us because I chatted with him earlier. So thank you, Dan Olson-Bang and Professor Heather Coleman for being with us today. And again, hopefully we'll hear from Professor Nangia shortly. I know she's trying to get to us as soon as she can. Okay, so first I thought I would give each of our panelists an opportunity to share a little bit about themselves so that you can get to know them a little bit better, a little bit about their background, their research area, and then give us an overall sense for what they look for in a top-notch portfolio. What stands out to them in their years of experience as reviewers? What advice do they have for you generally? And then from there, we will go into more of a Q&A format. Again, we received a nice handful of good questions via the RSVP forms, and we'll get to those first. But at any time, if you have a question, again, use the chat box or raise your hand, and we'll do our best to get to those. Okay, so Dr. Coleman, I'll have you start. Thank you. Do you want to share a little bit about yourself, Dr. Coleman? Hold on.
Yeah, sorry about that. I think we're having some muting and unmuting issues.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm totally happy to. So I am an associate professor in biology. My general research area is that I study how and why plants produce a secondary cell wall. So secondary cell wall essentially is wood, and its existence is what allows us essentially to have trees and plants that grow to great heights. And so I'm interested in both how and why plants do this, and then also how we can access carbohydrates and other components of this cell wall for biofuels production. One of the things that I thought might be useful to share based on some of the questions that I saw coming through is that my postdoc was sort of a merge between academia and industry. And so I had the opportunity to sort of, I applied through both venues, actually, through the industrial venue and through the academic venue. And so I have a little experience both writing and reviewing applications from both of those points of view. And I think we'll talk a little bit later. I know some people are interested in applying for jobs from industry, so that's why I wanted to mention that specifically. I also am thinking about what makes a top-notch portfolio and sort of my experience in maybe reviewing portfolios. I've been on a number of faculty search committees. I've also hired a number of postdocs and over my time here. And so I've reviewed a lot of applications for those sorts of positions. And I've also reviewed portfolios for the FPP program for a number of years. One of the things that I think is important to remember is that the people who are reviewing your portfolios are not experts in your field. So you still will want to have experts in your field review these documents. But one of the things that we as reviewers can add for you is sort of a general overview, make sure things make sense. One of the things I was thinking about is that when we review as faculty candidate proposals or faculty candidate applications, there's often sort of field specific stuff that you need to explain to a broader audience. And so I think we can help make sure that you're explaining things to a bit of a broader audience. So in general, I'm probably more critical about form rather than content, if that makes sense. So it can be difficult to review a research portfolio that's outside your field, but you can still tell if it's well thought out. You can tell if it's well organized. It helps if there's a good use of good figures. So figures that help explain your research statement or your teaching philosophy. If you can figure out a way to represent that in a figure, that's also nice. I think a lot, I don't know if I should say this, but I strongly feel that a lot can be saved by formatting and careful editing. So even if you don't have your ideas fully formed, if you've done a good job of presenting the ideas that you do have, I think that does go a long way. I would say the best applications, in my opinion, are clear and well organized, and they contain all of the required parts of the application. And they're easy to navigate. So they have page numbers, they have clear flow, there's white space. You give us time to digest the information that you're giving us. So I have two more things. In one part of the portfolio, you're asked to reflect, and I strongly encourage you to do this as you work through the process, in part for yourself, so it gives you time to think about what you're really trying to do, and to think about your research area, where you want to go, or your teaching philosophy, and how you want to be teaching and moving forward in that area. But also think about why, sort of what did you feel prepared to write in your portfolio, and where would you have liked more guidance? Because those things are also helpful for us so that we can improve the process for the next year. What sorts of things are required for job applications in your field that we might not be asking for? So how can we better support you as you write your applications? And then the last thing I want to say is that this is a big task, but if you take the time to do it well now, it will save you a lot of time in the long run. Having a well-crafted CV, a well-crafted cover letter, teaching philosophy and research statement are sort of the start, and then you always have to tailor those a little bit for every application. But if you have a strong draft to work from now, it'll save you a lot of time in the future. And the added bonus is that you get additional feedback now. So I encourage you to take advantage of that as best you can right now. So that's, I think I covered everything. So my background and what I think makes a great application. Yeah.
Thank you, Dr. Coleman, so much. That was really helpful and gave a nice overview of what you specifically, look for and what stands out. So thank you for that. Dr. Olsen-Bang, are you there with us? And perhaps you can answer the same questions and introduce yourself.
Sure, I am here with you guys. Thank you for having me. I am the Director of Professional Career Development in the graduate school. I work with, and my office works with both students and postdocs from master's on up to postdoc in a variety of different ways. We help with things like this. We do presentations. We assist people who are looking at the academic job market, at the industry and other types of non-professorial job markets. We do professional development. We have a research communication digital badge. In the course, I can go on with what we do, but everybody wonders, like, well, what are you doing now? And the answer is that we have a podcast that we've started called Gradcast. And so we've been doing basically Friday FAQs and then uploading it to share, because I think sometimes people like to have it in that format. We're covering basically the kinds of questions that we frequently encounter from students about various questions related to the job market or job markets. So I think that most of you probably have at least seen one of my spams before you blocked me, which I hope you haven't done, and I hope that you don't actually think of them as spam. We send out emails to all of you with programming and outreach to hope that you are willing and interested in getting our services and getting a leg up on the job search. So I'm happy to answer any questions related to that. And I'm also interested in answering the question, what makes a top-notch portfolio? Everything Professor Coleman said was exactly right. One thing I'll say, especially to the idea of it being scannable and well edited, people go into reading through a portfolio or a academic market package with specific objectives in mind. They go in and they, at least for a first read, are looking for specific things that may or may not be explicit for the writer of these materials, but is always implicit. It's always something that is your job to suss out, like what the priorities of a search committee are, and to provide. And being able to make something eyeball friendly allows people to skim, which is a peculiar thing to say in a sense, I think, because, if they're just skimming, then aren't they going to read my stuff? But it's surprising, but the more skimmable your materials are, the better chance you have of getting a good read. Because skimmable materials mean that you will allow, so as a reader of these documents going in with a particular goal, if I go into your materials and I see that, I find this section with your publications, and I care that you have several publications, and I find that very quickly. And then I care a lot about your research statement and where your future research is, and you've put that there, and I have a heading called future research, and I can go straight to it. That means that I'm going to give that a careful read that I wouldn't be able to give if I had to hunt around. And committees don't have a lot of time. And so your first look that the committee is going to give you is brief and shallow. And if they don't get what they're looking for in the brief and shallow look, they move on. You don't get that second look. So a brief and shallow look that gratifies their need for certain specific kinds of information allows them to take that more in-depth look. By the time you're actually doing an on-campus interview, if those ever happen again, with your committee, they've read everything about you. They've read your ResearchGate, academia. They're trying to see if you're on Facebook. They're looking at Twitter. They're maybe reading some of your pubs. But in that first glance, what really matters is giving them what they're looking for and helping them to find that with ease. So that's one piece of what I think makes a top-notch portfolio. The other part of it that I've found, much to my surprise over the years, is normally I find that people write at least adequate cover letters, often adequate research statements, and adequate CVs. Just at the start, at first blush, everybody's getting basically a C to a B on that. And many people, if not most people, in the first draft of a teaching statement are writing something that is frankly not good enough. And I won't say F, but I'll say F minus. People are writing a bunch of cliches. They're basically saying, I believe in creating global citizens and critical thinkers and all this kind of stuff. It's awash in cliche. It lacks specifics. And it reads like everybody else's. And so what I think makes it a top-notch portfolio in a certain sense, of course, everybody's materials need to be moved up so that everything is an A. But where you have the most room to make that improvement is in a teaching statement that is memorable, that is specific, that doesn't traffic in cliches, and in general just provides people with the opportunity to get to know you as a person who would work with a bunch of 19-year-olds. And so I think that often people leave that as, leave it to the last minute, or they don't work very hard on it. And I think you do that to your peril, because even if it's not a super important document to the search, first of all, they're going to ask you a million questions about your teaching almost all the time anyway, and you better have good answers. But secondly, it's just a document that has so much room for improvement. And if it's better than everybody else's, which are cliched and so on, then more power to you. That's a great opportunity for you. Your end of the lesson.
That's fantastic. The great advice, and really appreciate that. Just one clarification I do want to make. Once again, our first years are not at this point asked to create the research statements or the teaching statements. So I don't want anybody out there confused if you're looking at your first year instructions. That comes in the second year, but absolutely good to hear that advice now as you're thinking about what you might do as you proceed through this process and head into year 2. So fantastic. Thank you very much. All right, so let's go to some of the questions that were submitted in advance. Okay, and I just want to make sure Dr. Nangia, she has not been able to join us just yet, hopefully soon. So I'm going to have Dr. Coleman answer this question. Again, this was submitted in advance. What if I am still figuring out what my future career will be? How do I tackle the portfolio? So Dr. Coleman, do you want to share some advice on that question, please?
Yeah, so first of all, don't panic. I think it's fine to be still figuring out what you want your future career to be. And I think reading this question, I sort of could empathize with this person, because I'm not sure that I knew when I was a graduate student. I think that many people want to be faculty, but they don't know if they will get that opportunity. And then I think also I had a lot of uncertainty about what I actually really wanted to do, whether I wanted to go to industry or to academia or elsewhere, right? So one thing that is aside from the portfolio is that, and you may all already know this, but the Science Careers website has a individual development plan that you can go through. That's a really, really useful tool when you're thinking about what you want sort of the next 5 to 10 years to look like. And I would encourage you to go there if you've never done that. But as far as the portfolio goes, I'm not, I guess, thinking about especially the first year portfolio. Most of the things are going to be the same anyway, regardless of where you're going. I think you're still encouraged to identify a specific job and to tailor your application to that. But I guess my personal opinion would be to create a general or a CV that you can continue to tailor for different positions, right? So don't focus so much on creating a CV or resume for one specific sort of potential job right now, but to create a more general CV or resume, I think is a better use of your time. So make sure you have all of your information on there. Don't maybe spend so much tailoring for a specific job if you're still not sure what exactly that's going to be. I guess because my personal opinion is that I would rather have this be a productive time so that you're actually creating something that you'll be able to use in the future than really making a specific product that you may not be as useful in the future.
Great.
So.
Thank you, Dr. Coleman. And I just want to give Dr. Olsen-Bang a chance if he wanted to add anything. I think we'll kind of go back and forth as we move through these questions.
Sure, yeah. I think that when there is nothing wrong with not knowing exactly what your future career will be. I think realistically speaking, no one knows exactly what their future career will be. Creating opportunities for you to explore those different options for yourself is a good idea. And talking to people who do things that you're considering doing can often give you a tremendous amount of insight into whether something really is what you imagined it is and whether that is what you want it to be. And so I find that a lot of people, students are part of what you're learning is how to research. But when it comes to researching your future and your options, I don't always see people applying the skills that they're gaining in their programs and that they have in this particular way. But why not? Find out what options are out there by talking to people who do those things and see whether it really resonates with you. You'd be surprised what you can learn. I agree that the IDP is the individual development plan is a really good avenue to explore. Talk to people, talk to your faculty. Don't be afraid of not knowing, because you're joined by many people who feel that way. And so make sure that that's known to people. It's not something that you're keeping a secret. And that'll help you, I think, to be productive and positive about it, rather than thinking that it's some sort of flaw that someone's going to figure out about you, because that's not the case.
Great. Thank you. That's encouraging. And I'm sure we have some people in our group that feel that way. So that's good advice to know. So, all right. So our next question is also for Dr. Coleman. And how can I be effective and efficient in producing a portfolio of documents if I'm a perfectionist and have another main focus of work right now? So some of you may be feeling this way. I know everyone is super busy as we're finishing up the semester. So Dr. Coleman, I'll have you start. Do you want to say a few words about this question?
Yeah, so this is one of the questions that I knew in advance, and I spent a little bit of time thinking about this. And
Great.
I think my answer for this is the same as sort of regards to getting anything done. And this is something that I've struggled with over the years, is figuring out how to be most efficient in my time. And I do agree there's some amount of perfectionism. There's also can be sort of the fear of sort of getting feedback on something. So sending something to someone for a review and feeling nervous about that. So I guess the things that have worked effectively for me are to essentially set a time limit. So we all have a lot of things going on, lots of deadlines. So if you make a list of what you need to get done in this week or this day or whatever period of time works for you, and then you assign times to those things and you actually stick to those times. that probably is my number one tip, is to limit, and not unrealistically, maybe like get a start on it, see how it's going, think about how long it's realistically going to take you, and then set a cap on that. I'm trying to think of the things that are important. So how much time do you have, and where do you want to focus that time? So for example, if you're planning to apply, so just looking at your portfolio and forgetting about the other things, if you're planning to apply for a postdoc position, you might not need a final and complete teaching philosophy right now. So I would encourage you to put something on paper, but to focus on the things that will be a part of an immediate application. If you're nearing the end of your PhD, that would be one thing. The other thing I would say is that works really effectively for me, sort of with everything, is to plan your days, and when you're working, focus, and when you take a break, take a break. It's really easy, and I think especially now with working remotely and things just being weird, right? You're not taking your usual breaks. You're working potentially longer times, but being less productive. So remember to take breaks, and when you do take a break, actually shut everything down and walk away. One of the things that works effectively for me for that is Pomodoro technique, which is like 25 minutes on, 5 minutes off. You can find lots of free programs or free apps that you can download that work for that. That's one thing that works well for me. The other thing that works really well is to chunk my time. So if you have times of the day when you're very good at thinking, use that time to do things like your research statement and your teaching philosophy. If you have times when you aren't able to think as clearly, so for me, that's in the evenings, I'll do things like formatting and making figures and stuff like that, right? Stuff that doesn't require the heavy thinking work. You can map out a figure when your brain is fresh and ready to work. And then you can do some of that stuff that is a little bit more mindless tasks, maybe, or require a little bit less focus when you are distracted by other things. And then the third thing that I would recommend is, and I think this works well because there's a big group of you doing the same thing, is to have an accountability partner. So with a person within this group, perhaps set a timeline or set interim deadlines to get things done. Stick to those deadlines, and either just report to each other, or you could actually exchange documents as well to get feedback if you're comfortable doing with that. And if I realize this is about not having a lot of time, so maybe you don't want to exchange documents, but even having somebody that you report back to and say, yes, I've gotten my teaching philosophy done, and I'm not going to touch it again, and I'm going to move on to the next thing. And then the point of that being getting things done and setting a timeline is that hopefully you have time at the end to go through and review before you submit it. So I think those are the major things that I would suggest doing.
That's great. That's really great. And I completely agree. Now that we're all home, often work and home and everything, it's blending in ways that we're not used to experiencing. So any of those techniques can certainly be helpful. If anybody out there, our participants, have apps or techniques, as this is really a time management question, I think, if you have things that are working well for you, please feel free to share them in the chat, absolutely, for everyone to see. And Dr. Olsen-Bang, if you have anything to add related to time management or this question, I'll pass it to you.
Sure. I think I see two questions in this. One is, how can I, succeed as a perfectionist, and the kind of difficulties that are involved in that? And how do I do this when I have another focus? And to the latter question, one of the difficult things about these materials and the job search in general is that you always have another focus when you're doing this. The negotiation, one of the great things about being in the WiSE-FPP program is that you get to do this. You buy time essentially by doing this work now, as I think Professor Coleman kind of indicated earlier, so that when you're actually on the market, you have a strong foundation. I can't tell you how long and difficult the process can be for somebody who is going into the job market cycle in the fall for an academic job and finds themselves overwhelmed at that time by both needing to create these materials from scratch and then making all the changes and all of the customizations in order to make good materials in real time while other demands are made on them. And so it's actually a really terrific opportunity, I think, to do some of this work. But it's true that this always feels a little bit extra compared to other things. And at some point, and hopefully only briefly, searching for a job becomes a job. And you know, to the extent that you can spread it out, that's a good thing. I think that what Professor Coleman said about sort of making a judgment call about when something is done is really, really important. And you know, part of the project that you're doing here in the FPP is creating documents that are imperfect and that are meant to be worked on and to receive feedback. And so it's important to remember that you're sort of in an intermediary stage in this, and to accept the imperfections of it as a way of enabling you to get the feedback that you need in order to make this better. So, you know, this is part of what, you know, perfectionism can make that aspect of it difficult, but this is in a sense designed for making these kinds of improvements that I think are most helpful.
Great, thank you so much. I see that we did get one question. Mobby asked a great question. Mobby, if you can just hang on, we're going to address that question. Very similar question on the next slide. So we will get to your question in just a bit. Okay. Okay, so this one is for Dr. Olson-Bain. Some employers are asking for diversity statements. How do I incorporate my diversity statement? Should I also include diversity-related activities such as training? What are your thoughts on that?
The diversity statement is, you know, it's probably 5 or 7 years old in terms of it becoming kind of more commonly asked for. And I think it's moving towards being asked for nearly 100% of the time for materials. And so they are important to do. I'll again take this as a two-part answer. And I guess it is asked twice. One thing about this to remember is that diversity, in order to write a good diversity statement, you have to show not only that you're accepting of and embracing of diversity, but also that you're doing something about it, that you are in some ways using your various platforms and hope in the future to do so to advance diversity. And so to the extent that you can participate in both on the receiving and on the giving end, diversity related things during your program, the better your diversity statement is going to look. And obviously also, you know, it's a good thing for you. It's a good thing for the world to do. So, you know, the most difficult statements to write are the ones where a person is saying basically that they believe in diversity in various forms and that it's very important, but they have nothing exactly to show for it, either in things that they've done in their classroom or in terms of, you know, what they've done sort of intramurally to advance diversity. The best diversity statements do those things. Excuse me, I'm doing a lot of Zoom calls these days. But to back up in terms of what a diversity statement is and what it does, I think of a diversity statement as a cousin of the teaching statement. Partly because though there are many different circumstances in which advancing diversity takes place and can take place in all different kinds of settings, the same value of specificity, storytelling, vivid examples that I would suggest for a good teaching statement are also really important in a diversity statement. So diversity statement can be about forms of diversity that you represent yourself as a person. Doesn't have to, but it often does. But it's also about what you do in the classroom, in a research lab, in various settings to advance and sort of promulgate the values of diversity that you are sort of espousing in the document. So the answer to how do I incorporate my diversity statement is, you know, it's similar in tone, I think, to a good teaching statement. It just has a specific kind of theme to it, and that theme is diversity.
Okay. Thank you. We're rolling right along here, and I want to make sure we have some time for questions from participants. So let's get on to our remaining questions that were submitted in advance. This one is also for Dr. Olsen-Bang. Do you have any advice for how to strengthen a research statement? We've talked a little bit about research statements so far. Anything in particular that you want to add about developing your research statement? You're muted, you're muted.
Sorry, before I
No.
answer that question, I believe that Professor Bhatia is here. And so maybe she'd like to take a shot at it. I don't know if that's possible. We could unmute her and see if she's...
We can. Professor Bhatia was going to just join us as a participant. You may be thinking
okay.
Dr. Nangia was going to be a panelist.
I'm sorry. Yes, I'm sorry.
Yes, no, that's okay. And, you know, Dr. Bhatia, certainly let us know if you want to join the conversation.
All right. Anyway, I'll answer the question. So,
Okay.
How do you strengthen a research statement? So I'm kind of an outsider, and so my advice is, I don't know, take it for what it is. I think that a good research statement obviously gets more into the weeds about your specific research than you might get into in other elements of the portfolio. For instance, a cover letter is something that will be looked at by a variety of different constituents, and consequently needs to speak to your research in a way that a variety of different readers can understand. Whereas the research statement is often keyed more closely into a a specific specialist audience. Nevertheless, there are signposts that should be there that can be read by a variety of constituents as well. So whether I have the specific knowledge to understand the complex mathematics involved in your research, I still should be able to see a signpost that indicates that this research has not been done before, right? Novelty is something that transcends different fields. I need to understand the relationship of this idea to a variety of other ideas. Are you disagreeing? Are you agreeing? How are you advancing the field by doing this particular thing? How does your field relate to others? It needs to be eyeball friendly. It's typical for a research statement to begin with the work that you're presently doing, which often, if not always, culminates with the dissertation work that you've done. But often what I see in research statement drafts is that I see people writing a bit of the, a lot of, let's say 3/4 of the document is about what you're currently doing. And then there's a part that says future research, and that future research section basically says, I'm going to do more of what I'm doing in so many words. I'm going to do this and I'm going to do more of it. And so sometimes you really do continue your research in a particular vein, but there should be mature thinking about the future of your research in a way that demonstrates that you are an up-and-coming scholar, that you can potentially get grants, funding, that you have publications either queued up or the potential for publication. And I think that what I often see is kind of people not being able to really think through their future. And as much as they're excited about your present, they're buying your future, right? That's what they want to see you do with them. And so it's very critical that you be clear-eyed about what your future is so that your audience can get excited about buying into it.
Great, great. Thank you. Dr. Coleman, do you want to add to that at all? As a researcher yourself, I just want to give you an opportunity if you want to share any advice on research statements.
Yeah, so I think two things that I would add to that. I agree with all of that, and two things that I would add or emphasize maybe is the making it clear. So especially if you're coming from a graduate position, or in the future when you're going from a postdoc to a first faculty position, make it clear what is yours, so to speak. Different fields are different in terms of how much ownership you have over the research that you're currently doing and how much really sort of stays in your PI's lab. And that's one of the things that when you're writing a research statement, you want to make it really clear what intellectual sort of property, I guess, for lack of a better word, you get to take with you. So if the whole project was the brainchild and funded by your PI, you probably can't take that specific project with you, but you could develop a sort of a tangent to that, or a further on research from that, or whatever. But just it's okay to make that clear what's yours and what you can take with you. And then the second thing, and I've sort of already said this, but I would emphasize it again, having a good figure goes a long way. It comes back to what Dan is saying about readability and sort of ease of access and all those sorts of things, that you can refer back to this figure that has sort of a clear link to the text that you're reading. It also gives your eyes a break from all that text, so you can take the information in a different way. So those are the two things that I'd add.
Great, great. Thank you very much. Okay, so this next question I think is very similar to Mabi's question that she posted in the chat. And if I'm wrong, Mabi, just let me know. If we are interested in a job in industry and are using an example job from industry for our cover letter, can we still submit our CV, or do we need to make a resume for the example job? So Dr. Coleman, you want to answer this question, please?
Yeah, and I think this isn't a totally off the wall sort of, or unique question, I guess, because we have had this experience. Last year I had a couple of, or over the past years, I've had a couple of examples where people have applied or used a job posting that was not in academia. So I would say it's up to you. Like, I guess I sort of read the question one way earlier and now I'm reading it the other way. So I think it depends what you want to do. I think you can submit a CV if you want to keep it, as I was saying, sort of more broad. If you don't want to really target yourself yet to either industry or academia, I think it's okay to go broad. If you are actually applying for this specific job, then I would tailor your full portfolio towards actually applying for this specific job. I think it's okay to make that clear, and you're providing. I'm trying to think, there's a cover letter. I can't remember if there's still a cover page, but if you are applying for a specific job and so your portfolio includes a resume instead of a CV, you can just state that on the first page, that you're really actually applying for the specific job you've listed. And so your portfolio materials have been tailored specifically to that job. I think those of us who are reviewing portfolios are quite happy to see this being used for the application for a specific job and to be able to support you in that. Yeah, so I'm not sure if I'm totally answering the question because I read it differently both times. I think it's fine to do it either way.
Okay.
So.
Okay, great, great. All right, so we have our last question that was submitted in advance. And this one is for Dr. Olsen-Bang. Is there a target page number length for the portfolio? And what about the CV resume? What are your recommendations there?
So the cumulative length of the portfolio, I'm not exactly sure, but I can give some basic norms for lengths of things in terms of documents, which then, you can do math and figure out where yours should land. But, I think it's pretty common in many fields for a cover letter to be around 1.5 to 2 pages. There are fields I've seen where it's 1, I've seen fields where it's 3, but I think the most of 2 pages is common for a cover letter. A CV should probably be a minimum of 3 pages. Obviously, everybody's looked at some successful professor's 25-page long CV and felt like they had to fall over or something like that. Sort of it's like a scroll that unfurls across the room. That's not an expectation for you, but obviously, at some point, your CV should get long, and I think that holding it in your hand and feeling the weight is something that committees probably are guilty of doing more often than they'd like to admit. A research statement is, various lengths from 2 to 5 pages, I think, depending on the field, and I think that it can be quite different. A teaching statement is a 1 to 2 page document. If you can squeeze it onto 1 page without it looking squeezed, I shouldn't use that word. I think that would be good, but if 2 pages, that's also fine. Just make it a good 2 pages. Diversity statement's probably a 1-pager. So no one has ever accused me of being good at math, but I think I've covered the documents, and that's about as long as it should be. Now, the CV/resume thing actually indicates two different lengths. So a CV is long, right? I mean, that's part of the goal, as I said. A resume, I think a PhD can get away with a 2-page resume. But the industry standard, the norm for a resume is 1 page. Many people shudder when I say that. And the reason why you can do that, or what makes that possible, is that a resume is tailored not only in terms of putting things, moving blocks of text around, but also deleting things that a prospective employer may not want to see on your resume. So it can get to 1 page with some degree of ease.
Great. Great, thank you. We have a question, so I think we'll move to that. That was the end of our advanced, questions submitted in advance, and we have a question from Mariah Pierce related. I'm having trouble writing my cover letter. Do you have any resources to help me tailor my cover letter to a specific job? As of now, I've written a general cover letter. So, Dr. Olson-Bang, do you want to speak to that first?
Yeah. What I would do when just starting off and writing a cover letter is I would encourage you to start with a post that involves some specifics. I think people often start off with a kind of a cover letter out of nowhere, and it's a little tricky. It's tricky to do that. Whereas if you start with a post to which you would respond, and you do a little research and try to imagine yourself in that job, that can give you some opportunities. But there are, in terms of cover letters, some things that are kind of always present that you can look at. So there's the introduction part that announces what you're applying for. It says who you are. I'm currently a PhD candidate in X. In my final year, I expect to defend in May. And then there's some element in that first paragraph that speaks to the fit of the job. Not broadly, like, I believe that my experiences and research area are a great complement to yours, because that doesn't mean anything, right? They don't know anything yet to believe that. It involves some degree of research. From there, you move in a sort of a boxy way for an academic job. You're either going to start with research in a research intensive program, or teaching. If there are many where the length of these two pieces is equal, and sometimes they're not equal. So for instance, in a very research oriented professorial job, your teaching part might be a little bit squeezed out by the research element. In a teaching job, and the extreme version of this might be in a community college, but let's just say for a very teaching-centric school, your research won't be quite as lengthy, right? Because that's not necessarily what they're looking for. And then after those two sections, whichever one comes first, and then the second one, your last part of it is closing. One more sentence that reiterates your, fit in some way or other, and then thanks them for their time and consideration, provides your contact information, and then you sign out. Sometimes I see people say, I've attached to this, and this, expect under separate cover. I don't understand why you would use that space for that kind of housekeeping at the end of the document, personally. And so I think that's the basic shell, that's the basic framework. The other thing I would suggest is to talk to people and try to persuade people to share documents with you. I have some examples that I can share privately with people that I'd be happy to do as well.
Thank you. Thank you. Dr. Coleman, is there anything you want to share in terms of what stands out with a cover letter, or how to customize your cover letter for different positions?
Yeah, so I think Dan did a great job of sort of describing what in general the letter should look like. The only thing that I would add is that without being super blatant about it, perhaps, mimicking some of the language from the job posting is often a good idea. So every job posting has specifics that they're looking for, and to sort of go through that and echo a little bit what they're saying. You can rephrase it or whatever, but just to show that you actually do meet the qualifications that they're looking for.
Terrific. Terrific, thank you. I'm just looking at our chat box. I see that Sharon Alestallo, WiSE Program Director, did post something about diversity statements. So I encourage you to take a look at that. You think it would be appropriate to address DIE and the research statements, such as assembling a diverse? Okay, okay. Anybody else have questions? I'm happy to unmute you if you'd like to talk to our panelists directly. That is perfectly fine. We'd love that. Also, feel free to post. And Sharon, I'm happy to unmute you if you want to share, if you want to talk a little bit about your statement there. You can let me know. Again, this is your time, so if you have questions, you know, please take advantage and we'll ask our panelists.
More than ever, we don't bite.
Yeah.
Hello.
Okay. Yes, this is Sharon. Hi, Sharon.
It is. Hi.
Okay, fantastic.
One of the things that I have found and looking at job search preparation and a variety of other research on diversity statements is that sometimes we spend so much time in writing this isolated statement and it's not shown in other aspects of the portfolio. So I have come to really think that you have to know how to integrate diversity, inclusion, and equity into as many aspects of your portfolio as you can. So even a value statement in your cover letter, and I think a teaching statement is obvious. Where I find difficulty in figuring out how to do that is in the research statement. So my question is to Heather, how would you advise somebody to include it in the research statement? For me, it could be about something like building a diverse team, but I don't know if research statements typically cover that, or how you research, if it's in health, social, or psychological arenas, will ensure inclusion of diverse populations or be generalizable to diverse populations. Can you comment on that, Heather?
Yeah, I mean, I think if there is the opportunity, and even if people don't ask for a diversity statement, I don't actually think it's a negative to put one in. So I probably would still put the vast majority of this into a diversity statement. I think for the, I feel for the research statement, you're really looking for sort of evidence of excellence in research. I don't disagree that they overlap, and I think especially, so as a plant biologist, diversity doesn't come into my research directly, right? And so I've never really thought about how to incorporate it in a research statement because that would be something I would keep elsewhere. But I think you have a good point about talking about how if you're in health research or social sciences or those sorts of things, how diversity comes into play in your research directly. I think that would be appropriate in a research statement. And I also think if there isn't an opportunity for a diversity statement, and sometimes there isn't an opportunity because the way you apply has a very formulated, you know, you attach this here, you attach this here. So you don't really have thought for a diversity statement, and you can't. I would definitely add research statement.
Dr. Coleman?
Yeah.
Okay, all right. Did you get a chance to finish, Dr. Coleman? I don't know if you got cut off there or not, but thank you. Okay, fantastic. Thank you. Great question and very helpful advice there. I know Dr. Bhatia would like to add as well to this question. So Dr. Bhatia, I thought I had muted you.
Yeah. Hi, everyone.
Oh, hello, Dr. Bhatia.
So I would agree with Heather. Actually, so I think Sharon's a great question. Where do we have to add diversity statement or just some sentences? After going through many applications for faculty, I'm looking for more faculty, not from industry. I think faculty research statement, I am really looking for the future or direction of research in a very simple, and I like Heather's idea, graphics, which is easy for me to read And I want that not to be really mixed with anything else. I just want to see that clear direction. I'm not interested in reading 6 pages, which has full of different kind of things. I'm typically looking for 2, 3 different ideas which are doable in next 3, 4, 5 years. So I want to clean, simple, easy to follow through that, realistic, where the source will be coming and all of that. And I think there is a place in a cover letter, there's a place in teaching statement if we don't have a separate diversity statement to bring it creatively, your ideas about diversity.
Terrific. Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Bhatia. Glad you could join us. I'm just looking at the time. Our hour has gone by quite quickly. I don't see any other questions at this time. So I'm going to move to our last slide and just absolutely give a big, big thank you to our panelists today. Thank you, Dr. Bhatia, as well for joining us. Really, really appreciate you sharing your expertise with us and encouragement. That's been terrific. And to all of our participants, we had a nice group today. I hope this was valuable. I hope it was helpful to you. If you feel you have a question that didn't get answered, absolutely do not hesitate to email me, and I will do my best to get an answer for you. My email address is there, and I think, you know, you guys get emails from me regularly, so don't hesitate to email me. Finally, I do want to point out that we are going to evaluate this session. You will be receiving an email from me shortly with a short evaluation. Please take a few minutes to complete that. Your feedback is super important to us. We do read them, and we do take those into account as we think about future programming. So with that, I will once again say thank you, and I wish you all a wonderful day. Stay safe, stay healthy, and as always, let WiSE know if we can help you or support you in any way. All right. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.